Hello, everyone. Welcome to Beyond the Lane. We are going to be talking about the summer of change at Spurs. There have been loads of things happening at the club over the last 3-4 months, and we're going to look at as much of it as we possibly can in this video. We're not going to go too much into depth on everything because I've already covered that over a number of videos over the last couple of weeks, but it's more to try and put a timeline through all the different bits and pieces that's happened at the club from the tail end of last season. So we'll begin with a quick recap of how last season went, where it finished, and then we'll start looking at all of the changes that have happened at the club since then. So if we look at the end of last season, we finished seventh in the Premier League, an absolute terrible finish with a record nobody wants, the most games lost in a season, 22 or 23 games lost, which is abysmal. And actually, to be honest, if you're looking at league form alone, Postecoglou would have or should have been sacked long before he actually was. But it was kept on till the end of the season, which kind of thinks because of the European form, it was allowed to continue. Other managers have not in the past been granted the same kind of leeway. In terms of League Cup and FA Cup, we didn't do particularly well. We should have expected to challenge on both those fronts, but actually couldn't. Then looking at the European competition, we did okay getting through, and when it hit the knockout stages, we seemed to really turn it on, which is a shame because what we've seen in those European ladder stages against Frankfurt, Bodo Glimt, and then into the final, we were actually showing tactical adaptability in terms of changing formation during a game and making substituting changes that actually strengthened the position on the field. Something that if Postecoglou had it deployed during the season, because the players seemed to be able to do it, we would have been looking at a season where we still have the same manager as last. So we ended up getting all the way through to the final, as I say, against Frankfurt, Bodo Glimt, and then in the final itself with Manchester United. We were eventually the 1-0 victors in a game that probably most neutrals would like to forget because it wasn't particularly exciting, especially when you look at the Champions League final with Inter getting completely and utterly decimated by Paris Saint-Germain. In comparison, it was a very, very poor game. Unfortunately for us, we had no creativity in the middle of the park because Kulusevski, Madison, and Bergvall were all out injured, so we had a very defensive midfield lineup, which really lacked in creativity for us going forward. We ended up snagging a very early goal through Brennan Johnson. I know people are saying it wasn't his goal. He says he touched it. It's good enough for me. And we won a European trophy, the first in 40 years and the first trophy in 17. Off the back of that, the players went on holiday. Some of them went off on under 21 international duty, and the manager, Ange Postecoglou, went on holiday with his family after quite an intense season. He then returned from holiday to find out that he was no longer required in post due to the inability to challenge and compete on all fronts, despite bringing home that silverware. What we ended up having before that and on the run up to it, we've seen the creation of a CEO post in Tottenham, something we haven't had before with Venai Ventakashin. I think I've said that right. Apologies if it's wrong. Coming into that role. If you don't know him, he spent 14 years at Arsenal, revitalising and revamping their behind the scenes and being exceptionally successful at it. So you can kind of see Daniel Levy and the board looking at him as someone that can do the same thing for us, especially given the amount of work that's went in on the commercial side as well. He took a year off from Arsenal when he left and had been heavily approached by a number of clubs across Europe simply because of the phenomenal work he did at Arsenal during that period. We ended up being successful, and it may very well be that the London connection actually helped. And I can't remember offhand if there was any kind of personal tie-ins with Daniel Levy previously, but it looks like it could be an appointment that has a long-lasting effect and outcomes for us, for our club as a whole. And we'll kind of get into that a little bit later on as well. So when Postecoglou ended up being sacked, we were then on the hunt for a brand new first team manager for the men's side. And on top of that, there were a lot of names being mentioned for that role, one of which was the current incumbent now, Thomas Frank, a player that didn't really do an awful lot in his career, but in terms of management was very, very successful. If you look at a lot of the stories that have been written about him on his rise from coach to first team manager, it goes to show you the perseverance that Frank actually has in terms of what he's done and what he's developed and done across the board, where he's been in the Danish national team as well as his hometown clubs in his country of origin. It's he's done very well and was highly sought after at the time as well for what he was able to do at youth level and seeing that transition through. Some interesting bits in terms of chairman, but that's a video for another time. Thomas Frank comes in, and as part of that appointment, he wanted a number of coaching staff to come with him. In terms of change, this led to quite a massive undertaking in the background, all coming in with that CEO appointment. We've seen the medical department changing completely, given the fact of the number and the high rate of injuries we've seen over the last couple of seasons. Changes were needing to be made, and that was done with the person in charge, as well as other members of staff around him being released from the club and new people coming in. With Frank coming in, he also wanted to bring Justin Cochrane as well. Excuse me, as well as a number of other coaching staff and analytical staff to come in and help support the revolution that he is looking to build at Spurs. With a number of coaching styles and changes that we didn't see beforehand at the club are individual coaches being given responsibility and encouragement to make those conversations, as well as giving instruction on the pitch as well. If you haven't noticed it in games previously, Thomas Frank is actually very encouraging of getting his coaching staff to stand on the sideline, sorry, and to deliver instruction from the side for the areas that they are responsible for, whether it's set pieces, defensive, attacking, counter-attacking, midfield, defense, attack, goalkeeping. All of that stuff is encouraged to be instructed from the sidelines during a game, and not just on the build-up and in the background during training, but actually as it's happening. Something else that you may not have noticed is that he also has a number of analysts within the stadium on game days watching the match and giving feedback to the coaches on the sidelines. So that can be read, interpreted, and then distributed for instruction to the players on the pitch as well. If you haven't noticed in the game, if you get the chance to see the side, you will see the coaching staff. You will see Thomas Frank on that side and him encouraging his coaching staff when things start maybe slipping away a wee bit, telling them to get out there and to give the instructions based on the areas they are responsible for delivery of. Very much changed times in terms of Spurs when you look at Postecoglou and even some of the managers prior to that. Makes a big change. And although the fact that Thomas Frank has only been there for a good couple of months, you can actually already see the difference in the change in how we approach a game. But not just that, the fact that the players are taking it on board and delivering it on the pitch. If you have a look at the squad up until the point where we brought in Xavi Simons and Kolo Muani, only two players that we brought in have actually played on the pitch, meaning that that entire squad, bar those two players, have played for us, and those two players being Polinia and Kudus. They're the same people that were there last season and the season before, but they're playing in a way different from what we would have expected or even imagined could have been possible last season. We are changing a formation, not just during games, but actually the game starts. We are deploying different formations depending on the opposition. We are also tactically changing that formation in the middle of games. And we're actually seeing players playing into different positions depending on what they're being asked to do when those formation changes happen. And we're making almost every time the right substitution to enhance and to play what's being asked of them. So we're seeing already in a short space of time, Thomas Frank and that coaching investment, and by bringing in a whole range of coaching staff to support, actually delivering it on the pitch with the same players that were there for the season before, that we'd be looking at thinking, why the hell are these guys here? They can't do any of this stuff. Well, actually they can. They just needed the right people around them to do that. And we can only see massive improvement on that, hopefully, as the season progresses. But it's definitely a massive change in terms of the actual team from a footballing standpoint as well. So, some of the biggest things, and we're going to roll into transfers, but probably the masterclass of the transfer window might just be the appointment of Thomas Frank and the people around him, because we've already seen such a massive change from what we did last season to what we're doing this season. The Super Cup against PSG kind of shows that high level opposition and what we can do. Fortunately, we switched off for those last 10 minutes, and when you kind of see the players in that game towards it, they were very tired. Hopefully now what we'll see is a lot more match fitness and being able to do that. Plus a stronger bench will allow us to make those changes at the end and by the run the whole time. And we'll get to see, because we are going to play PSG again in the Champions League, as well as some of the previous teams that we played in the Europa League. So it'll be interesting to see how all that comes out. But from that point of view, it's probably one of the biggest changes. And rolling into transfers, very, very different window for us. We spent £181 million. And I know some players will, or some supporters won't want to count some of the signings that we made as part, because they were there last season. The spend was this season, so it's counting towards it. 181 million, more than I think we've ever spent as a club in a season transfer window, never mind over the course of a number of windows. So it does show major investment from the club, but maybe not quite enough, simply because when we look at some of our opposition, those teams that we're trying to catch back up to, but also to try and get ahead of, we're spending 180 million to catch up. They're already spending 200, 300, 400 million to go beyond, which means we're already starting off at a deficit of around 200 million. So ideally, what we should have spent was closer to three, and bringing in some more reinforcements to enhance that squad and into the first 11. But the good thing is, what we actually seen in this transfer window was the changes being made in terms of transfer personnel coming in that actually enhances the first 11 and not just the first team squad. Last transfer window, for the same type of thing, we brought in a number of squad players, or players for the future, with only one real first 11 enhancement, which was Dominic Solanke. So to actually see four come in one window goes to show that we are looking to enhance what we've got. But actually, that first 11, and not just to make it a more stronger squad, but actually to bring in four players that can slot straight into that first 11. So in looking at that, we brought in Kota Takai, 20-year-old, although he's just turned 21, literally just turned 21, Japanese international centre half, over 6 foot tall. Looks to be a very good player from what I've seen, but he's been injured, so it's going to be a transitional process seeing him come into the team. Matthias Tell was signed on a permanent contract. Kevin Danso signed again on a permanent contract. Kevin Danso, very solid centre half, works very well with either Romero or with Van de Ven, but actually in a back three works exceptionally solid as well. So a really good permanent signing on that front. Matthias Tell, he didn't have a great 6 month loan spell, but he did okay. Relied heavily on when probably he should have been given the time to acclimatise and adjust. Took responsibility in the Super Cup final to take a penalty, missed it unfortunately, and ended up getting towards a reviews by sections of the support that I really don't want to speak about again. But the young lad showed character, and hopefully we'll see a better version of him. When he came on in the game against Bournemouth, he had a really good shot that just went wide. I almost feel that all he needs is one to hit the back of the net, and we might see a different resurgent player, because he does have a massive ceiling in terms of potential, and he could come good for us. Signed on a 6-year contract, so it's not as if he's going to go anywhere. On top of that, we then signed Mohamed Kudus, an absolute baller on that right wing. The creativity, he's able to drive, he's able to take players on, but he always looks for that final pass. And in an interview after the Burnley game, where he set up Richarlison for 2 goals, he says his job is to serve the striker. In other words, I'm there to give the ball to him to put. No, it's not for me to do it. It's for me to give to him to do it. So that's music to my ears. We've had too many wingers come in that try to cut inside and take a shot, when actually you're there to give the ball to the guy we're paying the big money to put that ball in the back of the net. We tried for Gibbs White. That kind of fell flat in its arse for a whole host of reasons, and that just never worked out. And I don't think it was ever going to work out when you look at release clauses. Did we hit all the requirements to trigger it? Maybe, maybe not. We went back to try and appease Force by offering more money, £68 million, 8 more than what it should be. And they said no. He ended up signing a new contract without that release clause. And we'll wait and see if anything ever comes off that from our side. But we will wait and see. Failure to comply with that meant a couple of weeks of doing absolutely nothing in the transfer market, and then bang, we signed Paulinho on a season-long loan with an option to buy at the end for 30 million. Absolute baller. If you don't believe me, go and have a look at his stats in his last season for Fulham. The unfortunate thing for him was the move to Bayern Munich. Ended up with a manager change there, with Vincent Company coming in and not fancying him in that role, as he favoured other players for it. But that means it was more for us. We went in, he made the move for us, and already in the first 2 games of the season showed what he can do. But we all had a bad game against Bournemouth, and it's good to get it out of the way early and not going on a run and everyone thinking we're going to win the league. After that, we then tried again for Eze. That kind of fell flat in its arse, but I do think, personally looking at it, it was a deal that was never ever going to happen, given the fact the agent, his club, as well as the player were constantly trying to get Arsenal involved to get a bidding war on. Arsenal only came in with the Kai Havertz injury, knew exactly what Palace wanted for it, simply because they'd already tried previously for a lot less, and just came straight in, offered them the money they wanted, and the player was always going to go to them based on us versus Arsenal. Arsenal supporter, there's only one winner at the day, and it was never going to be us. We then took advantage of the Chelsea situation with Xavi Simons, a whole summer worth of him going there. He was never going to go anywhere else. Well, we've ended up gazumping Chelsea. They started looking elsewhere, kind of dragged their heels a bit. We phoned, we asked, he said yes after speaking with Thomas Frank. Remember, Thomas Frank is someone that a lot of the supporter base was saying he's not the kind of guy that can pick up a phone and convince players to come to the club. Well, guess what? You're wrong. He did, and he did. So Xavi Simons is someone that's came. He's just played a couple of games for the Dutch national team. Looked to have done reasonably well, which means he is still going to be match fit when it comes to playing against West Ham at the weekend. So there's a player that I'm exceptionally excited for. And to be honest, in comparison with Eze, yes, Eze is a proven Premiership player. However, Xavi is no slouch either. He's got a lot of experience in the Dutch national team, PSG, as well as in the German league too. So we are looking at a player with such a high ceiling, 5 years younger than Eze, and we've got him on a 5 plus 2 year contract, which is an absolute masterclass by Levy, and he should be congratulated for that because it's a really good deal for us, especially when you look at a player with such high potential. And if you were aware of Xavi Simons before, when he was just coming through into the game at such a young, he was touted as a wonderkind. So hopefully we're going to see and reap the benefits of that, because that contract takes him right through into his prime as well. So as long as we can keep and retain these players, things will look good. Dominic Solanke ended up getting an ankle injury, and we swooped quite quickly to bring in a replacement, something the club had the finger pointed at them when it came to Madison getting injured, and it took us about a month to get a player in there to replace him, whereas we went straight out and brought in Moane, who, by all accounts, and if you watch a lot of the videos and you've seen some of the French league stuff, as well as the game time that he had at Juventus, is a really solid player, can play on the left, but can play right across the front as well. So there's so much potential there, and he comes with a really good pedigree in terms of game time for France, as well as Champions League and Europa League experience as well. So we're getting another experienced player that should walk right into that first 11, or at the very least be competing and pushing for those spots. So in terms of what we can set up for Saturday against West Ham, it is looking exceptionally exciting for us. And we'll have a wee quick chat about that, but I'm going to do a separate video for the build up for that anyway. But in terms of transfers, we have done exceptionally well. The poor side of it in terms of that is that we have put out so many of our young players out onto loan, which meant when it came to choosing the Champions League squad, we only have one homegrown player there, and that is Austin in goals. No outfield players, which has meant that we've had to leave out a number of first team players. And some of them lend to themselves because they're injured long term, but we've ended up having to drop Mateus Tell from that. A hard thing for the young lad, and personally, I probably would have taken him over Oderberg, but Thomas Frank does seem to favour Oderberg over Tell. So you've got to wonder, Tell has all that Champions League experience from having been at Bayern. So it does kind of wonder why we left an experienced player there when we're going to be hitting the ground running, and that we're going to need that type of experience in the back. But it is what it is. Hopefully the young player will take that on board, and some of the stuff that's already come out with him is he is going to use that as fuel to push on. If he wants to look at someone who was dropped for pretty much the same thing, go and have a look at Jed Spence. He ended up forcing his way into the team due to injury, and he hasn't been displaced since, and earned himself an England call-up. So if Mateus Tell can do something very similar, again, this is a player with a far higher ceiling than Jed Spence, then, we could end up seeing a catalyst here that makes and drives him forward to be better. So we just have to wait and see where that comes with that. But certainly on the transfer front, it's been a massive, massive change for us. We've seen a lot of younger players coming in that we purchased beforehand, with Vuskovic, who gives us a little bit of a showing in the Reading friendly to what he can actually provide, not just defensively, but actually creating and scoring goals as well. And we already seen that in his loan spell in the previous season in Belgium, where he did pretty much exactly the same type of thing too. So the future does look bright. The problem is when it comes to European competition, we will be looking to qualify again for next season, is that we need to start addressing that homegrown issue. A number of players will be considered B-list players, and then into the second season beyond this one, they will then consider to be homegrown. But we then have to think, well, actually, if we've got all these other younger players coming through from like Donnelly, Dorrington, etc. Are these guys going to get a chance at the club to put their name forward? Because these are the guys we need to be relying on to bulk out these Champions League squads. But if we're not giving them the opportunity to do so, then we've got a real problem. Pochettino said exactly the same thing in 2018, 2019 for Europe, where he said exactly the same thing. It's happened now. We should not be allowing this to happen again. We need to address these problems and issues within the club. And here we are, what, 6 years later, 7 years later, where we're experiencing exactly the same thing again. So we need to take note this time around and future proof the squad for this, especially if the changes that we're already starting to see and have seen in the club so far are being serious in terms of we're competing on front, which means we should be looking at having Europe every season, which means we need to ensure that the squad is there to compete and to be filled out at all stages. So we'll see how that goes. We can redefine that squad in January if we make it that far through the competition. So we can only hope that we have that opportunity where we can make the changes to allow that to happen. So we'll wait and see. Now, probably the biggest thing that we'll talk about now is the fact that more recently Daniel Levy has stepped down as chairman of the club. I think it hit everyone like a ton of bricks, whether you are someone who was very much for Daniel Levy to go, or whether you were someone who actually thought he did a good job given the fact of where he came in at, as well as what he's managed to deliver on the club. Certainly, when you compare the commercial financial to the football, he's actually superior, and probably a chairman that most fans would have liked to have had at their club from a financial aspect, from a footballing when it didn't quite go according to plan. He came in December 2000 as a board director, and then in March 2001 was appointed chairman, of which he spent nearly 25 years doing that job. From that, he's seen a commercial value of the club being 80 million when he walked through the door to being a club worth over 3 billion. And actually, when we talk in a wee moment or two about some of the things that have happened more recently, you'll see how much in terms of a commercial, financial and viable club that we actually have because of the hard commercial work that he's done in the background. So, you don't raise and build a club up like that. He's seen a successful transition from White Hart Lane to the new stadium. He's delivered a state-of-the-art training facility, of which was used by the Brazil national team when they were here. So, we're looking at things that have been put in that actually builds an absolute solid footballing foundation, but also makes the club financially viable for the future, especially when we're looking at FFP and PSR. We're already seeing a number of clubs in the Premier League falling foul of this, where Chelsea were instructed by UEFA that this transfer window they needed to make a profit, which they have done. But they've had to make things and sacrifices in the background to do that. Villa were fined £9.5 million by UEFA for PSR, and they've only managed to claw that stuff back for the simple reason they've had to sell an academy player, which under PSR and FFP stands as a pure profit gain. So you're seeing really good young players being sold off to other clubs. But actually, when you're looking at Europe, you're wanting those guys to be in the club to help fulfill the spots that you've got to enhance the squad to give you a better opportunity. But what we're actually doing is forcing clubs to sell those players to balance their books. Everton fell foul of spending, as did Nottingham Forest, I think, beforehand. So, there's a number of clubs that are really struggling with that. But what we actually have in Tottenham from a financial point of view, and thanks to Daniel Levy and his commercial nuance, is we have a very strong financial base and foundation to build from, which will lead us into the next chapter where, after his sacking, we have had Enoch and the board turn around and say, well, actually, what we want to do is emphasize on the things that have been said is we are here to support the club. The changes we're making were always planned. They're there as part of the whole transition. And actually, this is to help support the club in being able to move forward, to be able to compete on front and actually deliver the trophies that we all want as fans. But actually, as a board, we need to support and deliver as well. All we can do is wait and see is that actually going to happen? Peter Charrington has come in as a non-executive director previously and just March as well, funny enough, and has now been appointed as non-executive chairman, who is a brand new role altogether. His background is a non-footballing one. He was the CEO of City Banking Group for 26 years. So he's coming from a very similar financial pedigree as what Daniel Levy is. So I think in terms of financial viability, the club will continue to do that and strengthen, because that's the background that that gentleman has come from, very similar to Daniel Levy. But with that being a non-executive role, it means that the final decisions are being made by those on the board who have the ability to do so. So hopefully we'll start to see these things done. As with most change, what normally happens with these is you see people testing the water. Well, Daniel Levy was seen as an obstacle to a lot of things at the club. Lots of chairmen coming out saying they didn't want to do dealings with Spurs anymore simply because of the times that they have and what they've experienced negotiating either purchases or sales with Daniel. And without leaving, it probably opens up more doors for us to sign new players. But it also means that some of the negotiations to sell the club might actually go ahead simply because he was a bit more of a harder negotiator than what people would or have expected if they hadn't dealt with him beforehand. And what we've seen already since the notification of him having stepped down with immediate effect, no notice period, is we have supposedly had two bids that have come in for purchasing Spurs, both of which have been rejected by the board. The first one coming from PCP International Finance Group, and the second one coming through a number of a consortium, but mostly led by a company called Firehawk Holdings Limited. So when we're looking at it from that perspective, and the club is now being valued at around £4 billion, goes to show how much work has been done in the background to make such a valuable club, especially when you consider the value of that club when Daniel Levy came in after the purchase from Alan Sugar of 80 million quid. So in terms of that financially, we are at the top end of the scale. And certainly if you have a look at the amount of money clubs have made since Daniel Levy has been chairman of Spurs, we are sitting at the top of that in terms of money made. I think we've got 162 million profit overall, with Liverpool coming in underneath that at I think 72 or 75. So it goes to show how much we've actually done. But I've seen lots of different kind of tablets out there in terms of where that spend sits, and some of the valuations are very different, but we are at the top of that. So from a financial generation point of view, we have got a solid commercial and financial base, which makes us very appealing for someone to come in and try and buy us. Whether or not that happens or not is probably going to be a no, because Enoch and the board have already come in and said the club is not for sale. In my last video, when we talked about Levy leaving, that was my view. I would like to see it continue where we are right now without coming in from big consortiums or from Saudi backing, etc. I'd like to see the board put their money where their mouth is and invest on the footballing side, because we've not had that under Daniel. Daniel Levy has been very poor where we have done very well, where we really should be expecting the board to push on, like we've seen with our competitors. Arsenal have done it, Liverpool have done it fantastically well, City have done it. Even Nottingham Forest have spent more money than us this transfer window, which kind of shows you where we're sitting at, or where we were sitting at under Daniel Levy. They now need to put their money where their mouth is. You got rid of him for the same reasons Ange Postecoglou was gotten rid of. We have not delivered enough trophies over that period of time, and we have not invested significantly in the club. And whether that's players or we just haven't spent money, the biggest noticeable period, as I've mentioned in the previous video, was the Poch era. Those 4 years, we only spent £29 million. We came second in the league. There were a number of other seasons where we were competing and finished third or fourth, and we got to a Champions League final. What we should have done on those occasions was we should have invested heavily. We had two transfer windows where we didn't spend or bring in a single player. That is mental when you consider what we achieved during that point in time. And with the right investment and the significant players coming in to enhance the first 11 in that squad, we probably would have won the Premier League. We might very well have won a European trophy, but we'll never know because the manager was never backfetched. And we have so many instances over that 25 years where we have done something, but we failed to support the manager by enhancing that squad by significant transfer contribution and new players coming in to enhance and drive that club forward. And it's just never happened. So hopefully, as I say, what we'll see now is that will happen. So taking all of this into account, what does that leave for Spurs, and where do we look like we're going to be come the end of the season? So, as I say, we can't deny the contribution and the effect that Daniel Levy has had from a financial sense. It creates a firm foundation for us to actually go on and do something as a club. Hopefully, now with that change, we've got the new CEO coming in, and what the wording seems to be coming out from the club is that he will be taking on more responsibility as the chairman, as the non-executive chairman advising, but also with Vinay as the CEO actually being empowered to make the decisions. Now, they haven't exactly said what that means, and they're talking about him and his senior staffing. So you would think that Langer would be part of that, as well as a number of others at the higher level, to be able to identify the transfers and actually properly scouting systems to bring in the players that we actually need. And rather, because some of the ones that we do seem to bring in do have a feeling of opportunistic signings rather than players that were specifically targeted, watched, and fit the profile that the manager needs. You can go back through a number of seasons to pull out players like Dembele, Njai, Lo Celso, to name just a few of players that should have came in and enhanced what we did and made us so much better, but fell flat in their face because they just didn't suit the manager's style that brought them in. So they ended up not being played and more looked at as club signings rather than manager-led appointments. So hopefully what we'll see with this change and Daniel leaving is we'll see more of an active front on that. We'll spend the right money, we'll bring in the right players, and we will enhance that first 11, never mind just the squad, and we can actually start to do what they're saying they're going to do, which is they want us to compete on all fronts. Fine, give the manager the tools that he needs. We've got that with the investment in terms of the staffing structure behind the manager, but we need it in terms of the playing squad as well. And what we need to be seeing is more of that work that Lewis is putting into that transition from academy into the first team road. One thing I would say is that ENIC is still owned by the Lewis family. So, you've got to have a look at this. Was Daniel Levy up front? The one thing I said in the last video, and I'll say it again now, is you have to be careful what you wish for. A lot of people wanted Daniel Levy out. He's gone now. What are we getting next? Because what you might find is that in a number of seasons' time, you might look back on it and go, okay, maybe didn't do the right things in the football front, but we've fallen flat on our arse when he left. So hopefully that won't be the case. But as I say, it does. The saying goes, be careful what you wish for. Well, you wished for it, you've got it. We've just got to hope that the club moves on as one, and that means from the board all the way down to the staff on the field and doing what we're here to do, which is deliver success on the pitch, a good, attractive style of play, and actually the fans being happy and be looking forward to games. We'll say this season is the first time in a long while I've actually looked forward to watching Spurs play and actually getting through a whole game without wanting to either put a remote control through the video or shout and scream or just not watch football at all. So we're getting there, and the team is looking good. We're playing well. We're changing when we need to change. We have the right manager in play, and sometimes what you find if a big consortium comes in, that manager could leave and they try and bring in a bigger name. I don't think we need that right now. I think Thomas Frank is the right man to lead us forward. If we get the right players through the door, which this window I think that we have done, then we'll see the team kick on and drive forward and actually do and deliver something. In terms of where we're going to finish at the end of the season, I think we'll get into the knockout stages of the Champions League. I think we'll do a good cup run in either the league or the FA Cup. I would like to see us win one, and I think we'll finish in the top 6 in the league as long as we can continue to do the things that we're doing right now and what we're seeing, but actually stay injury free as well and get a lot of those other players coming back from injury too at the right times in the season to help push us on. What we might see is a decent January transfer window to bring in players that supplement what we've already got. The problem you then have with that is when you go to resubmit your squad details for the Champions League at that point is, are we leaving out other players to fit in these guys as well? So we've just got to wait to see. Remember, it's a World Cup year as well. So what you might see is some of these players actually playing out of their skin because they weren't selected for those squads to get into the World Cup final as well. So, look, it's positive, I think, all round. I'm a wee bit sad to see Daniel Levy go. He has done an awful lot for the club from that regard. But from a footballing perspective, it just never did the right things. And he's fallen foul of the same thing that actually a lot of the managers that he has sacked has done as well. They've not done the right things at the right time. And unfortunately, it's taken 25 years for him to actually realise that this is what it is. And hopefully what we'll see now as a fan base is we will be more unified across the board in terms of our thoughts. we'll see a lot less of these protests, and actually we'll all start pulling together. But what we really need is the board to actually do the things that they're now saying, is support the manager, invest in the team heavily, and bring in the right players. And we can see all of this stuff happening. And then next season we can kick on again. So again, a summer of change right from the very top to the very bottom. It is an absolute roller coaster of a ride supporting Spurs. And this summer has definitely probably been the biggest one that I can remember in over 30 years of supporting the club. So, it will be interesting to see what is your thoughts on the changes, everything that we've spoken about here. Let me know down below. It'd be interesting to get your take on it as well. Share it with your mates, share it on any social medias you've got, put it out there, let people see it, let them come up with their own opinions. Importantly, subscribe to the channel so we can help grow and put more of this stuff out as well. Either way, it doesn't matter. We have the game at the weekend against West Ham. Hopefully, we're going to see all of our new signings. Moane wasn't on international duty, which meant he managed to get a good few training sessions in with the rest of the players who didn't go away either, which means it puts him more into contention for starting at the weekend as well. So hopefully we'll see that whole brand new attacking lineup, because there's so many possibilities there now with these four signings that have come in, as well as the players that we already have in the squad. As I say, we'll put out another match day preview video specifically for that, but I'm really excited for the game against West Ham at the weekend, and hopefully you will be too. Either way, guys, thank you very much for watching the video. Come on, you Spurs.